everyone, I'm Allie Buckman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to make with you today this SuperDuo and Old Lace bracelet. And it's a fun use of some SuperDuos, a really quite easy pattern using 2 needles. So we're going to be using 2 size 10 needles. I'm also going to be using Wildfire in the .006 size, and I'm using the white because the colors that I've gone with are some see-through iridescent ones. I'm going to be working with 11 O's, a 15O, a couple Swarovski crystals, and a couple glass pearls in a 6mm. To make a 7-inch bracelet, I'm going to be using 5 of my glass pearls, and these are in the brown iris color. I'm going to be using 16 of my Swarovski crystals, and these Swarovski crystals are in the tanzanite color. To match those Swarovski crystals and give a nice look to it, I'm going to be using a cup button in the light violet color. I'm going to pull out more of the purple by using the SuperDuo in the lavender pastel. It's a nice kind of muted amethyst color. 15 O's, I'm going to use some galvanized gold. Galvanized silver, galvanized gold, both would look nice with this project. They're just going to be used a little bit to hide some threads on the sides that I'm not too happy about with this one, so I'm going to change it up for the one that I'm making for you guys. I'm also using an 11O in the dyed violet silver lined alabaster. So we're going to be using just a couple of the beads that you see here, and really not many at all because it is rather a thin bracelet. You can make multiples of these. You could actually make them 2 wide as well, kind of reversing, doing the different sections of the lace here that I call it with opposites. So the lace here and the lace there and vice versa. Again, I'm using 2 needles, so that means we're going to put on the clasp right away, and you're going to dump out little piles of your beads because we are going to be using all beads right when we get started. We're going to go down our bracelet in one direction and we're not coming back, so we are going to just go in one direction and reinforce and put our clasp on right at the start. One tool that I use a lot is the thread burner, and this is the Thread Zap too. And once you burn the end of your thread off your roll, it's a good idea to have a needle nose pliers or wide jaw pliers handy that you can flatten out the end of that thread. That's going to fan it out, and that's going to make it easier for you to thread your size 10 needle. If it gets stuck after that, you just give it a little pull. You can even pull it if you want with your pliers and just pull it through there. That's a little trick of the trade. I'm going to put that needle on one side, and then I'm also going to put the needle on the other side of my thread. When I'm making, I usually cut about 5 feet per bracelet. Is a fair amount. If you're doing something that is really wide, you may need a little bit more than that. If you're doing something simple, you might not need as many or as much, but about 5 feet is usually what I pull. When I teach classes at our stores, I usually tell people to pull a good arm or a wingspan. Most women are between 5 and 6 feet, so you figure you have enough with that. Some of my male customers that bead, I always tell them do a little bit less. We have one in particular that always pulls a fair amount and it gets knotted and tangled sometimes. So right about 5 feet, you can always add extra thread if you need to. You're going to want to start by dumping out your beads in little piles. Again, we are going to use all of the beads at the very start. So I'm just going to make little piles here at the top of my beads, or at the top of my mat here with my beads. I am working on a bead mat, and this is just a nice inexpensive addition, and you want to work a nice flat kind of working surface to work on. Because I am doing the bracelet with 2 needles, I'm going to start out with my clasp. So I have my cup button here, and I'm going to decorate the center of my cup button with a SuperDuo. The SuperDuos and the cup buttons work really well as far as the whole side and the width apart. So I'm going to put on a SuperDuo, and I'm going to put my cup button on so that the dome side is facing down. I'm going to drop it down to the middle of my thread, and then you can see my SuperDuo in that lavender color just decorating the cup button just a little bit. Coming out of this then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an 11O, 2 11O seed beads on the right needle, 2 11O seed beads on the left needle. I'm then going to add here I'm going to reinforce my clasp by taking the needle that was on one side, either the right or the left, doesn't matter which one, and I'm going to go through the opposite side, going up the cup button, up the SuperDuo, and going down the SuperDuo and through the cup button on the other side. That's going to reinforce and put 2 strands and 2 threads through the clasp closure there. Give a nice tight pull so that way your seed beads sit right in place. To get started, I'm going to then separate my threads. I'm going to put 3 seed beads on my right needle, and I'm going to put 3 seed beads on my left needle. After that, I'm going to let them drop down next to my clasp, and I'm going to get ready to add my first of my 6mm beads. So to add my first bead, I'm going to add an 11 or a 15-0 on my right needle and a 15-0 on the left needle. Let those drop down next to my 11-0s. Then I'm going to take my 6mm bead. I'm going to put my needle one from left to right and the other from right to left and come out of that bead. Let that bead drop down next to your cup button. And you can see it's just going to decorate the side a little bit there. I'm going to pick up my needle then on the right hand side and put on 1 15-0, 3 11-0s, and let that drop down. Stick that needle in the bead mat when you're working with it, and you're going to do the same thing on the other side. 1 15-0 and then 3 11-0s. Let those also drop down on the other side, and there you have them in place. What I'm going to do now is get ready to do my first little almost reverse herringbone section here. You can see it backwards without the X. The X is going to get added at the same time. But the first thing I'm going to do to lock in place is I'm going to pick up one of those SuperDuos in the lavender color, and one needle is going to go from right to left through the first hole. Through that same hole, I'm going to take another needle going from left to right, just like I did with a 6mm glass pearl. I pull that nice and tight, and you can see it's just kind of sticking up there. Thread is going to be exposed on the side. If you want to, you can take 3 of the 15-0 beads, and you're going to go from the top hole, or the bottom hole to the top hole, and that's going to decorate the sides a little bit. So you're just going to see a little bit of the seed beads there on the side. I'm going to take the needle on the other side. I'm going to decorate it a tiny bit, putting on 3 seed beads, and I'm going to go from the bottom hole to the top hole, making sure not to go through any of those seed beads. And that's just decorating that side a little bit. So you can see those 15-0s are just kind of hanging out there. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get ready to add my next layer of my SuperDuo beads. So what you want to do is add a SuperDuo on the right needle, letting it drop down, and you're going to add a SuperDuo on the left needle. I'm going to take my needle and thread then, and both on the right hand side and the left hand side, you're going to go from the top hole, or the bottom hole of your SuperDuo to the top hole. That's going to expose thread on the side. I'm going to do that on the right, and I'm going to do that on the left. And that SuperDuo then is just going to sit in right there next to the other one. So you can see those kind of sitting in there. In the middle of this, I'm not going to stick anything. I'm going to pull these together. The next time we're going to stick a crystal in the middle. So the needle that was on the right hand side and went towards the left, I'm going to take, and we're crossing through those SuperDuos. So they're going to cross together, and the needle that was on the left is going to come all the way over to the right. So basically you're crossing from the outer side, going through from the bottom hole to the top hole, and you're going to pull them together. It's almost like a reverse herringbone. Next, what I'm going to do is get ready to add my third layer of my SuperDuos. And when I'm adding the third layer of the SuperDuos, I'm also going to be adding my first of my 4mm crystals in place. So my needle that's on the right hand side here, I have one that I just kind of pushed off to the left, and I have this one on the right. I'm going to add a SuperDuo, and I'm going to add my 3 little 15-0s on the sides just to decorate so I don't see as much thread. So from the bottom hole to the top hole, just like we did on the other one, give a nice little tight pull. I'm going to add a 4mm crystal and let that drop down. On the other side, I'm going to basically do a repeat where I add my SuperDuo, my 3 15-0s, and then I'm going to sew through the top hole of my SuperDuo on that other side and through the crystal. Give a nice tight pull. And that gets them right there in place. So you can see the effect that's going on. So you can see where I'm adding the 15-0s just to decorate the sides a little bit so it's not so plain looking. I didn't add them in here because you have more SuperDuos sitting tight, and I don't want the 15-0s kind of affecting the way that they sit. So you could right in there, but it might get it a little bit tight there. When I'm coming out of my 4mm crystal there, I'm going to pick up my right needle and put on another 4mm crystal. While I'm there, I'm going to put on a second 4mm crystal, and you'll see why in a second. On the left needle then, I'm going to pick up another one of my tanzanite beads, drop that down next to my project. The second tanzanite from the other side, from the right side, I'm going to take my left needle and sew through in the opposite direction. What that's doing is actually creating like a right angle weave. You can see there with those 4 crystals in the middle. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that little X that sits on top of the lace portion. With the rounds, you can see it sits nicely on top. It's going to do the same thing for the crystals. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew, and I'm going to use 1, 2 of my 11-0s on my right needle. Then I'm going to use 2 11-0s on the left needle, letting those drop down next to my project. And then I'm going to pick up a 15-0, so I'm changing it a little bit. I'm going to pick up my 15-0 bead. I'm going to go through from right to left, and then I'm going to go through from left to right, giving a nice tight pull, and it's going to fit that 15-0 just nicely, just a little hint of gold right over top of those crystals. And purple and gold is really popular. So this is a nice kind of all purple, but because we got a lot of different tones going on, it's not going to be too much purple. On the right hand needle there, I'm going to put 2 more 11-0s, and I'm going to do the same thing on the left hand needle. After I do that, I'm going to crisscross through the Swarovski crystal that's at the start of that almost right angle unit. What that's going to do is pull that little X right on top of the project. And then I'm going to pick up the needle on the other side, and I'm doing it on going through the other way. Give a nice tight pull, and that X sits just right on top of my project. And there you have it. I'm going to continue now by sewing through the crystal on the side that we added, and I'm also going to sew through the crystal at the top here. So my needle is on the left side now of the crystal. The needle that is in on the left side is going to go through the left side crystal, and then from the left to right on the crystal that's at the very end at the top. Now basically you've learned the whole bracelet, and we're just going to be reversing this little section here as we build the opposite way. So to reverse this section, it's very, very easy. We're going to take a SuperDuo. We're going to take 3 of our 15-0 seed beads. Oh, getting wrong sizes here. 3 of the 15-0s, just like we've been doing. And I'm going to then sew from the bottom hole to the top hole of my SuperDuo bead. Give a nice little tight pull. Again, on the other side, goes on a SuperDuo. 3 of my 15-0s, sewing from the top hole, the hole that I just went through, to the bottom hole. And that gets it nice and tight. In the middle then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 more SuperDuos with my right hand needle. And then I'm going to drop that towards down, and I'm going to pick up the other needle and sew through in the opposite direction. That's going to lock those 2 in place there. Give a nice tight pull, and that puts those 2 right in place. When I go into the bottom then, I'm going to take my needle that's on the right. I'm going to add, going through on the side so you see the thread just like we've been doing. I'm going to add another one of my SuperDuos. Pick up 3 of my 15-0s. And I'm going to sew through from that bottom hole to the top hole. So I did that all with 1 needle. And now basically I'm going to go on the other side and do the same thing. So I'm going to add my bead, sew through my SuperDuo. I'm going to go from that top hole there of the SuperDuo, sew through it, add my 15-0s on this side. There's 3 15-0s that I got caught on my hands. I always pick up the 15-0s with the side of my hand, and then they kind of go all over the bead mat. So I'm going to pick up 3 of those and not lose them this time. And I'm going to sew down through to the most outer hole of that last SuperDuo. Give a nice tight pull, and there you have it. So you're getting that same pattern, just looks a tiny bit different because I'm using the 15-0 beads with it as well, and kind of getting that little SuperDuo and lace look to go even more by adding those 15-0s on the side. You can see it on the wrist now. It's given a nice kind of fun purple and gold look to it. And I'm going to continue on adding my seed beads. When you get to this section here, the way that we're going to add the next one of our 6mm beads is just like we've been doing. That I'm going to pull my needles apart. I'm going to add 3 of my 11-0s, 1 15-0, add my 6mm. While I have that same needle in hand, I'm going to add 1 of my 15-0s, and then I'm going to add 3 of my 11-0s. I'm going to let that needle drop. Oops. Then I'm going to pick up the needle on the other side. 3 11-0s go on, 1 of my 15-0s. I'm going to cross through in the opposite direction through that 6mm bead. It's going to flip my project around so it's to the back. And I'm going to add 3 more of my 11-0s with a 15-0 first. Let that all drop down, pick up my other needle, and I'm going to crisscross through my SuperDuo to hold it all in place. After that, I'm going to put the 15-0s on the sides of my SuperDuo, and then I'm going to get ready to continue on with that pattern, adding my SuperDuos, adding my 4mm crystals, and continuing on lengthening the bracelet the whole way until I have my 4 groups of my little X's here, my little lace design with that 15-0 in the middle, and I'm going to have all 5 of my 6mm bead on. So I'm to the end adding my beads here, and I'm done my little 4 pieces of my lace, and I'm getting ready to add my last of my 6mm bead. So I'm coming out of the end of my SuperDuo. I've already crisscrossed through that second hole, and what I'm going to do is basically repeat what I did on the first side, and instead of adding a cup button, I'm going to be adding a loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up our 3 11-0s, my 1 15-0, then I'm going to pick up my last of my brown iris pearls. I'm going to at the same time put on a 15-0, 3 11-0s, and let those all drop down. I'm going to pick up my needle on the other side. I'm going to add my 3 11-0s, my 1 15. I'm going to cross through that glass pearl, going the opposite direction, pick up 1 15 and 3 11s. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these strands basically together by using one last SuperDuo. So I didn't use a SuperDuo on this side, I used some seed beads, but the seed beads are going to be my loop. So I'm going to use a SuperDuo here to kind of hold this together. And I'm just putting the SuperDuo through, one needle through one hole, one through the other, and that's going to kind of pull that together there at the end. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a loop. I'm going to do my loop out of my 15-0s and my 11-0s. So I'm going to kind of move them all into one pile here. And I'm going to do 3 of my 11s, 1 of my 15s. 3 11s, 1 15, and this is just to decorate it a little bit at the end. You can do it with all 11s or all 15s, that's your choice. I'm just doing it so it has a little bit of a pattern design to the end. If you know peyote stitch, you could also do it with peyote at the end. That always makes for a nice finish. I'm going to do a couple more beads here to get my pattern finished and to have that nice finished end. So I have all the beads. What I use when I do my clasp is I always use the beads that are all over. So you'll see me kind of picking up the needle. I use it as an opportunity to clean up my bead mat, picking up all the beads that I pulled with my elbow. So it looks like I'm going to need a couple more beads. You always want to test out. I don't normally mix the 11s and the 15s, so I want to make sure that it's big enough for my cup button to go through and we look good. I'm going to take that needle then that's in my hand, and I'm going to go down the other side of the round duo, or of the SuperDuo bead, through the 15-0. And I'm also going to go at the same time through my 6mm bead, because I'm going to tie my knot on the side of one of the 6mm beads. On the other side here, I'm going to pick up this needle. I'm going to reinforce the loop, taking my thread and needle through all those same beads, and these are going in the opposite direction basically and around. It's going to reinforce that loop. Once I'm through that, I'm going to come down my SuperDuo, down my 11-0s, through the 15-0, and this is going to put the bead or the threads right next to one another. I'm going to give a nice tight pull with both, making sure that I don't have any extra thread exposed that doesn't need to be. Take my needles off. I'm going to take my thread. I'm going to tie right over left and then left over right. Just simply tying those threads together. Once you have that tied, you can burn it down with a thread burner. Do a little bit of glue and you're good to go and all finished with your design. You have your nice little SuperDuo and lace bracelet. I love the SuperDuos, they work up quickly. You need just those couple Swarovski crystals. They add that nice punch of just that shine and sparkle. I'm going to fuse my ends together here so I don't have this end still on and kind of driving me crazy. When I fuse together, the Wildfire beading thread is actually fusible, and what you want to do is leave a little bit of space left, kind of push those threads together, turn on your burner, and then burn down, and that'll fuse those together. And then you're going to have the end of your bracelet. Again, it's a nice thin bracelet that you could wear multiples of. I have a rather thin wrist, so this 7 is a little bit large on me. It's going to hang down a little bit. It's about 7 1/4. And it has a nice look to it for some really little effort and very little beads as far as amount wise. You're not even touching the tube really of SuperDuo beads, so you're going to have an opportunity to make a lot of these, and any 4mm and any 6mm bead will work. So just a couple 11-0s, couple 15-0s, couple SuperDuos, and then whatever beads you want to use. So if you get a chance, stop into our stores and we'd be happy to help you at our retail stores to gather materials to make this bracelet or any other class that you'd like to sit on and take with some of our wonderful employees and our wonderful instructors at our Potomac Bead Company locations. We're also happy to get you the supplies online if you can't get to one of our stores. There's a link below saying show more. You can click on there, and that's going to give you an opportunity to get the links for the different materials that are used in the videos. Thanks a lot for watching, and happy beading, everyone. Have fun making this SuperDuo and lace bracelet.